Hey folks, we just had a new patch for Dominions, so I'll go through the change notes here with everybody really quickly. We're going to skip through some of these, so yeah, stay tuned. Armageddon now leaves corpses in provinces. Not super impactful. Can be impactful for, if you're trying to harvest gems or something from corpses or turn them into zombies or something. I think there's more just like flavor, right? It doesn't make sense to kill half the people 10% of the population and not have any corpses. This is probably one of the most impactful changes in this patch next, which is Affliction chance is now based on the highest of max HP and current HP. So what does that mean? It means if you're like a 20 HP unit as your max HP, but you're at 10 hit points, it'll use max HP. That's what it had been before. So that part didn't change. It's always been looking at max HP. But the exception now is that if current HP is higher than max HP, now we'll look at current HP. And there are several situations where that could happen. One situation is like you have a pretender who's in friendly dominion, so he has a ton of hit points, let's say 200 hit points. You teleport into a place with, or move into a place with lots of enemy dominion. Your max HP is going to go down to like, let's say 50. Because, you were at 100, it got doubled in 10 candles to 200. Now you're in 5 enemy candles, so it gets cut in half. You go from 100 down to 50. But you're teleporting in from a place with a lot of candles, so you're going to have 200 current health at the start. And then you're going to have your max HP is going to be 50. It's a really big difference. It's like a 4x. The way Affliction chances work in general is it's based off the amount, like 2 units taking 1 damage every round in combat. Whether that gives you an Affliction chance has to do with how many hit points you have. If you're a 5 hit point unit, that 1 damage is going to have a very high chance to cause afflictions. If you're a very high hit point unit, like 200 hit points, it's a very low chance. So what this is going to mean is using pretenders in combat in general is going to be a lot more effective. In general, using like all sorts of super combatanting where you have like a prophet or things like that are going to be affected. The other thing that's going to be affected by this is things that will take you above max HP. And usually there's not a ton of things that are like that. I'm not sure how this interacts with Corpse Eater. That's one of the ways. I expect this has improved Corpse Eater afflictions too. I don't know how that code worked, but the big things are the life drain sources, right? So any life drain weapon can take you above max HP. Soul Vortex can take you above max HP. Those will now effectively kind of reduce the amount of afflictions you get as well. And I think that makes sense. That's lore appropriate. It doesn't really make sense that if you're like this huge, incredibly hard thing to kill because you have a ton of hit points, that like a little scratch is going to give you an affliction. Anyway, this is kind of cool. Added information about Marion Inquisition feature in National Summary. I didn't actually even know about this, right? So this is what they added. All Marion's provinces reduce enemy dominion or spread their own dominion up to 1 automatically. So if IlWiki is right, the mechanics here, let me pull it up. All right, the mechanics here is that basically if you own a province, it's going to start getting rid of enemy dominion, right? And it's going to have a 30% chance to remove an enemy candle every turn, 60% chance if there's a temple. This actually is pretty strong. Especially in provinces with like really high enemy dominion, getting that candle out when you're at like 8 or 9 enemy candles can be really hard. But this will start doing it passively pretty quickly. And if you build a temple there, it's going to be basically getting rid of 1 enemy, almost a whole enemy candle. Not right, well, 60% of an enemy candle every turn. That's a lot. And that's not even counting what the temple's doing. So that's pretty cool. So apparently this has been in the game for a long time, or I don't know how long, but I didn't even know about it. So that's cool. They're adding a tooltip to it, to the national overview. They're also going to spread your own candle up to 1. So kind of what this means is you could really get by with not many temples is Marion. Like they're gonna have, this is gonna go a long way, and I didn't even notice this. And I've played middle-aged Marion before, but it was kind of a blitz. But yeah, so I it's not strong enough where I was like, holy crap, and I noticed. But if I like going back and looking at it, I'm sure I would see the effect. So this is pretty sweet for controlling Dominion in your territory. It also means that through raiding people, you'll apply a slight Dominion pressure on them too, because just every turn you own a province, there's a chance you start removing candles. So anyway, that's pretty cool. All right, we're going to skip through some of the exploit bug-related ones, like this one about leadership items. This next one's kind of interesting. Iron Darts and Blizzard now have the Iron tag. So that makes sense. They're Iron. What does that actually mean in game? There's a few types of units which have Iron vulnerability. Tend to be like Jinn, and I think some Elves have Iron vulnerability as well. That's going to make this more effective. I can't actually think of anything. This is a buff, basically, right? I can't think of anything that gets protection against Iron. There's only things that are Iron vulnerable. So in that sense, this is now a better spell than it was, which is pretty cool. That being said, these things had just been nerfed. And the way they were nerfed is because they didn't get affected by shields. And now they got affected by shields, so that was kind of like a bug. But that was a significant nerf. They're significantly less effective now against units with shields. But now they're more effective against units with an Iron tag. It means stuff like Jinn, like Ubar, because Iron Blizzards, they already deal bonus damage, like 2x damage, against magic beings. So if you're a magic being and you're Iron vulnerable, which that's like genies, you're going to have a really, really, really rough time with Iron Blizzard now. So that's kind of cool. And of course, you know, thematic. Next up, we have fix for Rain of Stones not hitting heads as often as it should. I'm not actually sure the percent chance. I thought it was like it's supposed to be like 80%. We can actually test it. I'll fire up a test game. All right, so I've got a test game fired up. We're going to cast Rain of Stones here, see if we can sort this out. So Rain of Stones are falling. I mean, most people have hats. We could probably tell on some of these they have different... So they have 18... These guys actually have really good hats. So they have 18 helmets. So we can take a look, see what the protection rolls are. 18-9. 18-18. So every time we see 18, that means it's looking at... here it's 18-15, so let's check. 15, 15, 18. It looks like it's about 50-50 so far. 18. These guys are 16, 14, so if we see 16, 16, 16, 16, 16. So it looks like it's about 2/3 now. Updating my thing. 16, 16, 16. 18. Okay, it looks like it's between 2/3 and maybe up to 3/4, but I think it's like 2/3 of the hits are going to go to the head. Now, this particular PD has pretty good hats. And then they also have shields. So I don't know if the shields are going to show, because I think the parry check... Yeah, these guys aren't even getting hits. I think it's not even showing up in the combat log for most of these guys. Because it's not getting past the shield parry, and then it's not going to show up in the log. Because you can see these guys have way fewer things. So anyway, that's kind of interesting. So... These rocks, they're basic. I mean, you can see they're doing literally nothing to this guy with the shield and 18 head protection. Because I think it's like 2/3 of the hits are going to hit the hat, and then there's a big 7 parry shield, so it's going to block pretty much everything. So I think this is in some ways a buff for Rain of Stones, because hitting the head... I mean, and you know, it's like you're going to hit the body or the head. But what it does is it makes it more, like, focused. If you have hats and your enemy doesn't, Rain of Stones is probably going to help a lot more. Especially if you have hats and shields and your enemy doesn't have hats or shields. It's going to be a bad day with Rain of Stones. But you can see here, I mean, these guys, they've got hats too. A lot of units have hats. Yeah. And it's not a lot of damage. I forget. We can check what it is. It's 5 mundane damage. Yeah, it's not a lot. So if you have a hat at all, it's gonna go a long way to blocking this. Okay, so that's the Rain of Stones change. Pretty cool. Next up, cast order could be removed when changing items. These are like weird little kind of buggy things I've never noticed, so we'll skim through some of these. Can no longer give retreat orders to mindless commanders. So this one's actually really interesting. It used to be people who've played the game a lot have probably lost a golem commander or something because they set him to retreat and he dissolves. He or she dissolves. They dissolve. So it's like, what's going on there? Well, it's actually a really interesting mechanic. In the game, it used to be that, because it's now changed, that you could set your golem to retreat, and he would retreat. The problem is, if he's the only commander, once he goes to retreating, the battlefield loses all magic commander points. Like, the golem is a magic commander. You know, he has, like, magic leadership. So once there's no longer any magic leadership, and there's magic beings that are mindless, when there's no magic leadership, they dissolve. And so the golem would trigger his own dissolution when you scripted him to retreat. It was kind of annoying. But it didn't mean the golem couldn't retreat at all. If you had another mage in the province that had magic leadership, and they were not retreated, the golem could walk off the battlefield and retreat, and then later you could have the other mage retreat if they weren't mindless, right? And they could both get off the field, but you'd have to have the golem leave first, and then the mindless commander. So it's a kind of interesting thing. Kind of took me a long time to figure out exactly how all that worked, but that used to be how it was. Now, if they're a mindless commander, that retreat order no existo. It is not present. You can't select it. You can't script a golem to retreat. So, yeah, I don't know if this is like what I would think is maybe the best solution to the problem. I think it's maybe making it so mindless commanders can retreat. I think that makes more sense. You know, like they don't dissolve. Actually, I think that would be a good change. Like, it's really annoying when like a mindless colossal fetish dissolves because of the turn timer. It's like one way to deal with those units, which can be hard to deal with otherwise, but I don't think that's a cool feature in the game. I feel like commanders that are mindless shouldn't dissolve. So I don't know. That would be the preferred solution for me. But it's just kind of a really weird thing to have a mindless commander dissolve. Yeah. It also doesn't make sense. It doesn't really make sense. Like, think about it this way. Because here they've only changed the orders you can give it. Right? The idea of magic leadership is that, like, especially, like, you think about undead or something, right? Like, long dead will dissolve if all the undead leadership goes away because they're mindless and they have a certain type of leadership they need, and that goes away. The idea is they're being, like, for mindless units, they're being held together by, like, the forces of the necromancer that's leading the undead, right? And so that mage leaves, and now all the undead collapse. That makes sense. Like, that thing is holding them together. The thing, though, is when you have a commander who's there alone, like, let's say you have a mindless undead creature, and it's there alone, it would also dissolve upon retreating because it's mindless. That doesn't make sense because there's nothing external. There's no leader that's holding them together, right? Like, they are their own leader. They're mindless, but they're also like an automaton that's going on their own. They don't have like an external force holding them together. Whereas other things like clearly have a commander, a necromancer holding them together. I don't know. I think it's a weird mechanic to be in the game. I've lost a Colossal Fetish several times to them just dissolving. It's not a very satisfying way for fights to resolve. That fundamental part hasn't changed. Mindless commanders will still dissolve at turn timer and stuff, I believe. They just removed this kind of like trap you can accidentally set to like kill your own golem, which I guess is fine. But for advanced players, it removes an option to get a Mindless Commander out, because you could actually get a Mindless Commander to retreat if you gave him external magic leadership while he did the retreat. So they made it kind of less flexible. And it also doesn't make sense. Like, why can a golem not retreat? They can fight, but they can't, like, leave a province when an army shows up? Are they like a rabid dog that, like, is going to dissolve if they don't get to, like, sate their hunger on human flesh? That doesn't really make sense. Anyway, but it's a change. I understand why it was done, because it's very frustrating if you're a new player and you script your golem to retreat and he just dissolves. So they just made it where you can't do that. Okay, next change. Fix layout when writing messages to other players. There's something where I think this is like the things wouldn't line up. They would be like shifted in weird spots. I think that's what this is. Unholy Weapon Blast didn't affect enemy pretenders. That's pretty cool that this is fixed. You're still going to have trouble chipping through a monolith because it's 10 AP damage. So things with like 20 something, 28 protection or 30 protection or whatever. Yeah, you're still going to be doing chip damage. It's going to be like 10 versus 15, because you divide that, whatever that number is, by 2. 10 versus 14, 10 versus 15. Next up, we have performance improvements for the main map screen. Don't know what that is, but cool. I guess this is the 3D thing going in the background when you open the game. It's probably causing some trouble on laptops. Scroll bars can now be navigated using the home and end key, so that's cool. That takes you to the beginning or the end. That's pretty cool. I can't really think of any times where I'd want to use it. Let's see. So like here, we're looking at research. I can like do page up, page down. That'll also, well, this isn't a very long list. Let me see if I can get a longer one. So page up, page down, scroll slowly, home and end, go to the front and back. I mean, that's cool. I don't think that's something I'll be using much. Fix bug that made ground flicker in some battles. I'm not familiar with that. Fear overflow fix. There used to be an exploit where if you had squads just under 10, like I think 9, they would never run. Like they would somehow dodge fear mechanics. They could run, but they wouldn't run from the fear proc. They could run from other squad morale checks, but not particularly from the fear proc or something. It's not something I fully understand, but they got rid of that apparently. So now you can't game the system by having a squad too small where you can't get enough fear checks in it for it to cause a rout. So this is going to be a buff, though somewhat inadvertent and probably not very big, for some fear-based mechanics like casting panic. And I think this also will affect Wailing Winds. I guess you could have dodged Wailing Winds with small squads. So basically this is a small fear nerf. A small fear buff. But I think it's not going to be relevant to most players because most of the time they're going to be dealing with bigger squads. It probably is only like a very niche thing in advanced games where people were trying to manipulate that. Because I'd like heard a little bit of chatter about it, but I hadn't really ever heard much about it. So I'm guessing it didn't get used a ton. All right, crash fix for badly formatted map files. Cool. Safer handling of corrupted files. Okay, these things. And then mods. Cool. And I don't think there's too much here to report on. So, yeah, those are the changes. I think the big ones here to just repeat at the end. Afflictions now being based on current HP can be really cool. Definitely is going to help things like Titans and other types of pretenders you're going to use in combat. So jumping on top of like an enemy capital and stuff is going to be more viable with a big nasty pretender. Because you're not going to get like good HP regen from being there, but at least you won't get afflicted to hell as much. Cool thing about Marion, nothing changed except I didn't know about it. Now I do. So that's a pretty cool feature. This can be a pretty significant change for certain matchups. You know, like I'm thinking like Ulm versus Nabaa, or trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's probably like the biggest one. But I think Ulm versus all the elves, I think there's a decent number of elves that have some kind of iron vulnerability. So pretty cool. Rain of Stones thing I think is pretty cool. Definitely makes it more... The thing is, if it hits everybody, it's not as good like making it more focused makes it more useful because you'll find situations where it's going to hurt the enemy more than you, significantly more than you, and then you can cast it. So anyway, that's cool. Also makes sense. Stones are falling from the sky. It should matter what kind of hat you have on, not really what kind of chest armor you're wearing. Can no longer give. Yeah, this is the only one I think probably still needs some work. I don't think this is the final solution. Yeah. I'm not even sure how I would fix it. Like I think for this one, you would make it so that, yeah, I think just mindless commanders don't dissolve. I think that's all there is to it. I think that's the only change. I don't think you change the way other units dissolve. I think if they're mindless commanders, there's no external source holding them together. They're holding themselves. But yeah, anyway, that's it. Pretty cool little patch. And thanks for watching. See ya.